Tim. But you don't have to call the invocation after the other stuff.
Let's go.
Yes?
Let's go.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's public school board meeting. It is about 5:35, and so we will begin. As it is customary, we always begin our school board meetings with an invocation, which will be led by Mr. Ricky Booth.
On short notice, let's make sure.
A pledge of allegiance by Mr. Jose Gonzalez. Our mission statement by John Boyd. Our translation services are brought to you by Belinda Reyes and her department. And with that, I will ask you to please silence your phones and stand up. Mr. Booth,
Sure.
the floor is yours.
Please bow with me. Our gracious Heavenly Father, we come before you tonight, asking again for your guidance and your direction. For the members that sit up here on this dais, help us to lead this district forward during this pandemic. It is in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Is that quick enough for you?
Good job.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Boyd.
The mission statement of the School District of Osceola County is inspiring all learners to reach their highest potential as responsible, productive citizens.
Well said. Ms. Reyes, good evening, good afternoon. Good evening,
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Belinda Reyes, and I'm here to provide translation services. Buenas tardes todos. Mi nombre es Belinda Reyes y estoy aquí para proveer servicios de
Thank you. And I will ask for comments from board members at this time. I'll begin with our District 4, Mr. Clarence Thacker.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
District 1, Mr. Terry Castillo.
Thank you. I just want to continue to thank our community members and leaders for allowing me to speak in some of their platforms with regards to everything going on with returning back to school. I just really appreciate the conversation and the dialogue that we're having in our community. Thank you.
Of course, thank you, Ms. Castillo. I do not have any comments to make at this time. But our District 5, Mr. Ricky.
I have none.
Very well. It will probably be a long meeting and plenty of opportunities for us to. Oh, Dr. Pace. Yeah, I kind of felt that too. Like, we're gonna have a lot to speak about, right? Mr. Weissier, any comments? No, okay, so let's move on to business. Dr. Pace, I believe you have appointments and transfers to announce?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman Soto and members of the board. We have two administrative appointments tonight that I would like to bring for your consideration. As you know, we had a resignation at Poinciana High School as an assistant principal position, opening up a slot. And I'm pleased tonight to bring forward Crystal Farrell. Crystal has been a teacher at Celebration High starting in 2003, a teacher at Osceola Virtual School, and also has served as the Learning Resource Specialist at Poinciana High School since 2016. She received her bachelor's degree in English with a concentration in writing from Loyola University and a master's degree in educational leadership from Stetson University. I will share that Ms. Farrell has a tremendous passion for her work and particularly serving the students at Poinciana High School. During her tenure as the Learning Resource Specialist, she took on the role as graduation coach and has increased the graduation rate there by 10%, of course with the help of others, but she really led an effort particularly to help our ESE and ELL students graduate with a full diploma as opposed to a certificate of completion. I am confident that her impact will continue to grow in a role as an assistant principal at Poinciana High School.
Motion to approve.
So we have a motion to approve by Mr. Weissier, second by Ms. Castillo. We'll take a vote. Is there any discussion, question?
Congratulations.
Right. Anyone else? So we'll take a vote. All those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
I registered 5 votes. The vote passes 5-0.
Second appointment that I would like to bring forward tonight is the consideration of an administrative transfer. Mr. David Stone currently serves as an assistant principal at Narcoossee Middle, and I am pleased to recommend him for your consideration as administrator on assignment, manning our COVID call center. As you know, we continue to work with our school-based and district leaders on potentially COVID incidents and how we will respond with contact tracing, quarantines, and everything else that follows along with that. As we prepare to open schools, we know that the calls may increase in frequency. Just to ensure that we are following our safe guidelines, I'd like to have one consistent individual providing that service. Mr. Stone is an experienced teacher, an experienced school board member, a parent, a grandparent, and an administrator in our school district. He brings a sense of calm, a very level head, and a very strategic mind in terms of how he responds to situations. And I think he would be excellent in this particular role that would be funded out of our CARES Act dollars.
For approval.
Second.
Motion to approve by Mrs. Thacker, second by Mr. Booth.
Discussion.
Very well, Mr. Booth, you have the
No,
floor.
I just think this is a fantastic choice by you, Dr. Pace, and thank you. And Dr. Pace brought it up, but I think it's worth mentioning again. Mr. Stone I tried to make him a doctor. He'll call me out on that. But, Mr. Stone was a fantastic school board member, and I think this is he'll be great in this role. So great choice, Dr. Pace. I fully support this.
I agree.
Good comments. Right, so with that, we'll take a vote. All those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Registered 5 votes, the vote passes 5-0. Our next, I believe that's all the appointments you asked for, Dr. Pace?
It is, sir.
Very well. Next on our agenda is our public comments. We are receiving comments from different sources. Some of the comments have been directed to us by email, by social media, and all of those comments are part of the record and included to all the board members so that they can read and have them in their thoughts when they consider anything that goes on with the agenda for tonight. We do have 5 requests to speak for 3 minutes in public. And I'm just gonna call it according to how they were given to me. So when you approach the podium, please just say your name and your address for residency. I think it is, but I think we do have to ask for the address, correct? Very well. So I'm gonna begin with Ms. Christina Stewart.
So I'm here today, my name is Christina Stewart, my address is 4656 Egg Harbor Drive, Kissimmee 34746. And I am here to call on the resignation of everybody sitting at one of these desks. The fact that you all are even opening schools is disgraceful, it's shameful, it's sociopathic that you're willing to sacrifice our children for the economy so that businesses can make $1. You should all be ashamed of yourselves. And you're all clowns, and I'm calling on every single one of you to resign.
Thank you. Okay, all right. Our next request for public speaking is by Mr. Rick Joyner.
My name is Rick Joyner. I live at 17249 Meadow Bluff View in Dade City, Florida. Good afternoon. I'm with Total Building Integrations. We've been doing the district's work since 1999. I've been installing HVAC controls on numerous schools over the years. I'm here today to ask you if you're aware of the controls bid that went out last month for Canoe Creek Academy. I'm sure you're not, because we weren't, nor were the other 4 control bidders on the district's controls RFQ. This bid went out from Facilities Department under the disguise of being an HVAC repair job, which it wasn't. The Facilities Department purposely put it out through the HVAC RFQ, not so much to keep the 5 of us on the controls RFQ from bidding it, but to actually give the job to a hand-picked controls company on a silver platter. As a matter of fact, out of the contractors on the HVAC RFQ, only 2 showed up for the pre-bid meeting due to the fact that they read the specs and saw that it was a controls job and didn't know why they were even sent to it. Then at the pre-bid meeting, a single controls company shows up. They weren't invited by either of the 2 HVAC companies that were there. They weren't on the bid list or in the official email that went out, so how did they find out about the bid? I suspect they were invited by the Facilities Department to the pre-bid. When I started investigating this bid and what all happened, one of the HVAC companies called me out of respect because he had heard that I was digging. He informed me that the controls contractor that was at the pre-bid was bought by the owner's rep to the best of his knowledge. He said that he felt very pressured to use these guys. This was obviously orchestrated by the facilities department because the controls contractor who was awarded the job is not even on the controls RFQ for the district. They couldn't have bid the work if it ran through the proper channels in the first place. One more thing to think about also is the fact that since they are not on RFQ, how are they going to service the system after the warranty is up? Now, what is the best part of this entire underhanded, behind closed door dealing that went on with this bid is the fact that the controls company that facilities handpicked is not just the former employer of the newest employee of the facilities department, but the school district spent an extra $125,000 for them to do the job. Over if they had put it out to the proper channel, and that's just on phase one. Phase two, you spend another $20,000 to $30,000 extra. All for a system that nobody in the district can work on, that you don't have an approved contractor in RFQ that can service it, and your people handpicked them. Now, $150,000 to $160,000 doesn't sound like a lot of money for a job that, let's say, is $1 to $2 million, but when the job is only a $55,000 job, and they come in at $175,000, come on, what's going on here? And then on phase two, you coughed up another $25,000 on a job that was $250,000. Lastly, they decided to throw out the district standard control spec that's been used for the last 12 years for a new spec that was written strictly around this control contractor's product line. The server needed for it, they wanted to call existing, but no one had approved any new server or software for the system as of yet. That's how we found out about it, because when we went to bid on phase two, which we didn't even know there was a phase one, so we thought phase two was the only bid. They had released this new spec and had stated that the new system had to go on existing servers, which didn't even exist once we dug into it. The entire job was shady from day one. Just thought you guys ought to know. Hope you have a good evening. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I would like to ask if Frank Kruppelbacher could report back on the findings here that have been brought forward.
Work with the superintendent.
Thank you.
Back to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Booth, we have a meeting next Tuesday, so it'll be no later than the following meetings.
That's fine, thank you.
Thank you.
Don't we have a item that is related to what, item 14.1, is this something we should be?
Well,
I need Ruben.
That's, yeah,
So that,
that's
okay, so
for.
we're okay
So-
with that, okay.
So Mr. Kuchenbacher, just whatever report you have, just send it to the board and to the superintendent. Alright, so our next request for public comment is from I believe it's Lair Allen. Mr. Allen?
Good evening, school board. Dr. Pace, my name's Larry Allen. Oh, I'm sorry. I have to keep this up?
That's fine.
I'm 6 feet. Anyway, my address is 618 Robin Lane, Kissimmee, Florida, 34759. And first of all, thank you for your service to Osceola County, even if we don't agree on how things should be run in Osceola County. That's part of the game. And the reason I'm here is a lot of my members have been voicing their opinions about reopening schools. And in a nutshell, they're scared. One of the things that could help is if we had some clear rules and procedures about when someone has been exposed or tested positive for COVID. Next thing I want you to understand is back in March 19th, Orange and Osceola counties had a curfew. There are 328 cases total in the state of Florida and 8 deaths. This week, and this is only ages 5 through 24, non-white, non-Hispanic, 85,000 cases. There's a 12% positivity rate, and that's of 3.4 million people that have been tested. So I guess my question is, what does it take? How many people have to have been tested positive? How many people have to have been exposed? How many people have to die, frankly, before we close schools? That's a question that we need answered. Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Our next public speaker is April Isaacs.
April Isaacs, 1911 Kings Point Boulevard, Kissimmee, Florida, 34744. Good to see you, Dr. Pace, and as always, this board. Luckily, I haven't had to stand before you for the last 3 years. I think that we got somewhere. As a teacher in this county, I'm excited. As a human being, I'm scared. I'm not afraid to tell you how scared I am. Here are the facts, folks. We need to learn the word prudence. Webster's actually defines it as a state of being cautious. Why is it that other counties around us are pushing back dates to open schools? Why is it that other counties around us are now doing digital for the first 2, 3, 4 weeks? Why is it that we have colleges that aren't opening and are doing digital? So my question is then, to bring it to the people who should know, why are you making these decisions? Because in this time, I think we need prudence. The reentry plans, while I know that you work very hard on them, aren't clear. For example, the temperature taking. Who takes these temperatures? How many times will they get taken in a day? Not a week. We don't have time to worry about a week. We need to know every day who's got a fever. Now, obviously, a temperature is not the only thing that will be a sign of COVID, but it certainly doesn't hurt. And I noticed this lovely temperature machine you have out here. Folks, I don't want to tell you from a teacher who's making less than most of you, it looks a little bit more like the haves and have-nots, but I'm an educated woman, and most of your county's educated. We know that you probably got that from somewhere, donated. How about putting something like that in every school? How about something like that in the wellness center for your employees? Because right now where I'm standing, as scared as I am, it looks to me like you don't care about me. You don't care about my colleagues. There's no hazardous pay. Do you realize that Walmart, Chick-fil-A, everybody loves Chick-fil-A, Target, Starbucks, they're paying people hazard pay because they're essential workers. You guys tell us we're the most essential workers there are, but there's no hazard pay for face-to-face. Where are all the subs going to come from when people start to get sick? There are no plans for that. Who's going to teach those face-to-face kids? You're going to take my VE teacher, my co-teacher out of my room? I know you will. You'll have to. You'll put administrators in, but what happens when they get sick? And you're thinking, well, Miss Isaacs, where are your facts? What makes you think we're going to get sick? Today, in the last 24 hours, there have been 186 deaths in Florida alone, and 9,200 cases new in the last 24 hours, according to Reuters. Prudence, ladies and gentlemen, I'm wondering where it's at. Also, personally, I have a 77-year-old mother and a 79-year-old father who I just convinced to move here. My mother had a heart valve replacement last October. I was out most of it, taking care of them because my father is bedridden. I'm bringing them down here, and now they're scared for me. I'm lucky I don't have children. I'm scared for my colleagues who have children. I'm scared that you don't care about us. It's not that you're not good people, and it's not that you're not trying, but for goodness sake, give us something to actually believe in. Show some prudence. Consider your considerations already, or reconsider what you've already done. Think about going digitally until we're no longer the #2 epicenter in the world, not just the United States, but the world. Please, please, I beg of you, prudence. On Sunday, there was a 9-year-old girl. She had no pre-existing conditions. Her name was Camoralinum. She wasn't from a struggling family, and she passed away from COVID. Don't tell me that we know who's going to die and who's not from COVID, because the CDC doesn't, the WHO doesn't, even our governor doesn't. Please, it's okay to push back against some political person such as the governor or the president asking us to open schools. I know about economy. I'm not asking for forever. I'm asking to use prudence. And thank you.
Ms. Tamika Lyles.
Good evening, board. I stood here before you all a couple of weeks ago. 2 days right before numbers were released from Florida Department of Health that stated that there were 23,170 children under the ages of 17 that tested positive since beginning the pandemic. On July 24th, that number jumped to 31,150. That's a 34% increase in new cases among children in 8 days. 8 days. As of July 16th, 246 children had been hospitalized with COVID-19. By July 24th, that number had jumped to 303. The test positivity rate among children has gone up from 13.4% to 14.4% between July 16th and the 24th. Mr. Thacker, last time I was here, you showed so much humility about asking Dr. Pace about could we have time to readjust this schedule should something else occur, that we could not start schools. You were very concerned. You seemed to be the only one that was sitting up here that was really concerned about sending us back to school. I sat here and I listened to Mr. Washire, I listened to Mr. Booth, and you all seem to be more concerned about the economy. I understand that we have over 6,000 employees in this county that's with the school. I understand that. But what I want you to understand is that we don't have a choice. As teachers, you've given children, parents, a choice of 3 options. But teachers like myself, we don't have those options, okay? Because if we choose to teach digitally, we're still forced to go inside that school, even to teach digitally. We're forced to go in there. So my child that I've chosen, option 2, to stay home so that I can ensure that he's not at risk, I'm putting myself at risk of taking it back to him. The very child that I have stated has asthma and needs to be home, now I'm at risk of taking it back to him because I don't have a choice. It's my job. There are several other teachers like me that have health conditions, that are taking care of ill parents, or maybe their child is ill. They don't have options. They're scared to come here and stand before you because they're afraid of losing their jobs. I want you to understand the position that you're asking teachers to put themselves in by standing in front of a classroom of 150 students a day. Because that's about how many students I see a day, a minimum of 150. If I get sick, then I'm jeopardizing all 150 of those students that I come in contact with. We're sitting here on this board and relying on temperatures to be taken every day. When all a parent has to do, if that parent has to go to work and they have no other choice, is give a child a Tylenol and send them on to school. By the time their temperatures are taken at school, they won't have a fever, even if they had one. It won't read. They're putting everybody else at risk, and it only takes only one, for us to take that back home to elderly parents, to sick children, that you all have given us an option of leaving those children home to protect them. But you're putting us in a situation where we're gonna take the virus back to them. I'm asking you to consider this. You all are our voice. You have a duty. You have a duty. And just in case, if you don't know what the elements of negligence are, I'm gonna tell you. You first have to have a duty, which you all do.
Ms. Lyles,
And you also have to breach that duty.
Ms. Lyles,
Yes,
allow me to interrupt for just a moment.
yes.
We have a 3-minute limit. Now, I listened to your very eloquent speech. You're going into now a different subject, and I believe this is a good time to go ahead and pause it and give the next speaker an opportunity.
I wanna say this, Mr. Soto, because as a parent in this county, as a teacher in this county, and a taxpayer in this county, I have every right to stand before you and explain to you what you all are forcing working class individuals in this county to go through. I am the voice of so many others that are suffering in this county right now. You would not believe how many phone calls. Ms. Castillo talked about how many calls she got. Oh, I'm gonna tell you how many I got. Several calls I got, thanking me for coming before you, speaking on behalf of all of these teachers that lives are gonna be put at risk. Okay? Are you gonna pay for the medical bills that these teachers are about to incur? Are you willing to go to bed knowing that these children are going to die? A 9-year-old child, you tell her mother that she's gonna be okay. You tell her mother that her child is just gonna get the flu and she's gonna be okay because she buried her child. She's not gonna be okay. And she's one in many in this state. Have some heart. Have some heart. You have a duty to serve these people. Care about them. Care about them. They should not have to beg you all for money to pay their salaries and then stand up in here and beg you all to care about them going back to school.
Thank you, Ms. Lyle.
Have a heart. It's ridiculous. It's not a political front. It is about lives. They are dying. People are dying. Over 400,000 here. Have a heart. It's not gonna go away. And you're killing babies. You're about to kill children. Babies.
Our next speaker, Ms. Sarah Leo. Did I pronounce that right? Good evening, ma'am. Yep. Please, name and address, 3 minutes.
Sarah Leung, address is 1824 West Virginia Drive, Kissimmee 34744. Just taking a breath real quick.
Take your time.
Yeah. In high school, I encountered a change in leadership as an athlete. Our coach left to pursue dreams beyond that of our small town high school, and in the wake of her leaving, our leadership had been turned over and our athletic program a bit of a mess. Not much different than what we're seeing today. The parents who were used to the finest level of coaching were now faced with the unknown. The new coach that stepped in failed to provide the leadership, the innovation, the decisiveness, the motivation of our previous coach, and it was nearly catastrophic to the program. In one of our team meetings, a parent stood up and said, "Be a man, Mr. Cotton, be a man." Mr. Cotton was in fact a man. But what she was asking for was leadership, decisiveness, compassion for the athletes, and innovation for a program that was facing difficult choices. Today, you, along with the parents, teachers, and staff of Osceola County, all face difficult choices. So today I'm standing before you to ask you to be a leader. Be a leader, Ms. Castillo. Be a leader. Don't accept that this is the way that life is and that we will forever hide behind masks. Demand more of your local leadership so that we can maintain and control the outbreak of this COVID virus. Europe is no longer living this way. New Zealand is no longer living this way. New York City is no longer living this way. Many countries in Asia are no longer living this way. So I don't, and I won't, accept leadership that says, get used to it, it's just going to be the new way of life. Be a leader, Ms. Castillo. Be a leader, Mr. Booth. Be a leader. Respond when teachers in your district write you letters. Respond when constituents in your district raise concerns. Respond to those who want a leader. Be a leader, Mr. Booth. Be a leader, Mr. Weishire. Be a leader. We once had a conversation about wanting to bring in the best and brightest into Osceola County, with another generation of amazing innovation, of incredible teachers, and of successful students. Currently, the situation is much reversed, and you're losing those people. If nothing else, some of those people are losing faith in you. You want leaders in the community, Mr. Weishire? Then be a leader. To the rest of the board, be a leader. Don't be a follower. Don't wait and see. Be innovative. Be influential. Be what we are looking for in this time of uncertainty. Be the people who you want the community to look up to. Demand more of local leadership. Demand more of state leadership. Demand that this pandemic crisis get under control before you put children and teachers and staff into a building for 8 hours a day. But don't demand more of your teachers, because most of us give you everything we have, every single day. Be a leader, Dr. Pace. Be a leader. You ask that each of your teachers strive to be innovative every single day of every single school year. Your plan is developing, but as people before me have said, we don't understand all the protocols yet. We still need more. It is not quite innovative, not like Australia or Arizona or New York City and their innovative strategies to ensure that the needs of students were met during this pandemic crisis while they still shuttered schools. You and the Osceola County School Board have decided that you'll follow the mandates given to you by the state of Florida without questioning the continually increasing cases of COVID. And now you're caught in the moment where you truly need to be innovative. You need to protect your vulnerable students. You need to protect your vulnerable employees of this county. You need to have options for You need to have options for teachers who are parents of a vulnerable child. And you need to have a plan. The parents, the teachers, the students who are old enough to understand want a plan that is not case by case. We are not talking about multiple viruses. It's not a virus by virus basis. We're dealing with a global pandemic, a novel virus that we are still in the process of learning about, one that has now infected 512 children in Osceola County. And over 31,000 children in the state of Florida. I don't need to give you any more data. You know the data. You know the rate of community spread. You know that the rate of infection is far greater than what is safe for a return to school. Now it's your turn to be innovative. It's your turn to listen to the vulnerable and those who speak for the vulnerable. It's your turn to think outside the box. It's your turn to be a leader. So I turn to you, all of you. Be a leader, Osceola County. Be a leader. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, well said.
So this is a portion of our public school board meeting agenda that we call open for public comment. I think it's one of the most important items in the agenda. Because it takes a lot for people to make the trip here, put their names in public and make themselves part of a record and address the school board with their concerns, their questions, sometimes even just to let us know that, that they understand that sometimes it's tough work and they appreciate what we do. And I understand that there's a lot of rhetoric when people speak and they really want to get their message across. It's a form of communication that is not just what the written words, but how they're delivered. And so I don't interrupt or even say anything in between those public comments, but at the end, I may very rarely make a comment like I'm doing now, and that is that I care. I don't know when I have ever publicly or privately demonstrated that I don't care. I also know when I speak to my board members that they care. I have never have any indication that they don't care, and Deborah cares. Every morning, the first thing she does is that phone call. I talk to her about it, so we care. And we're handling this, it's tough. It's quite difficult. As a matter of fact, I'm 50 years old and can't remember time that I had so many things to consider, so much to read and learn, to discuss, try to get this right. And I don't think that was driving anyone on this board or Dr. Pace. It's politics. But science includes everything. Science includes the economy, includes what happens when there's a learning gap, which we've been trying to deal with for how long? Science is a virus that is new. Nobody's seen it before. Nobody alive has experienced an epidemic. Read about it. I studied about it a lot. But it's quite different when it's really happening. We're learning every day and we're trying to get information about other countries, what's happening when schools are open. We're trying to see what materials are available, what technology. Can we get these tests that we could get a 24-hour return? Deborah, are you working on that?
I have good news to share, sir.
So there's a lot of things that go into. But we also understand that if we accept only a level of zero risk to open schools, then schools have to be closed until we develop a vaccine, until it's tested, it's effective, it's deployed in the population to at least 90%. Is that what people want to wait for? And I think that what we're trying to do here is balancing the harms, because that's all we have. And we're trying to do the best that we can with the information, with the money, with the support that we have. To even assume or insist or insinuate that we don't care, I'm not gonna let that one just go without a response. And this is the only reason I broke my rule. This is really public comment. It belongs to the public and not to the board. I promise you I won't do it again unless I'm forced. And with that, I'll close this portion of the school board meeting. And we will recess for a board workshop. Mr. Boyd, take us forward.
Good evening, school board members. We're here this evening to provide a workshop for you for Rulemaking Cycle 2021A. We have only a few changes to the rules proper and many changes to the student progression plan. The first change would be to the cover of the rules proper for an update for the school year to 2020-2021. Then we have a proposed revision to Rule 8.10, safety, that continues the changes as a result of changes in statute and revises the policy language to implement changes within State Board of Education Rule 6A-1.0017, School Environmental Safety Incident Reporting, known as SESR, Florida Administrative Code. The remainder of the changes all affect the student progression plan. It would update the document to comply with recent changes in state law and provide consistency with district precedent and current practice. There would be an update to the school year on the title page. There would be an update to the acknowledgements page to reflect changes in school district leadership. There would be a change to the section, it would add a section called Introduction to clarify the statutory purpose of the student progression plan. There would be an additional introductory paragraph to clarify that residency requirements are pursuant to requirements within section 1002.31, controlled open enrollment, public school, parental choice, Florida statutes. There would be changes that would remove or delete duplicate citations, add citations, and delete citations. On page 23, there's deletion of language in order to comply with requirements in section 1006.15, student standards for participation in interscholastic and intrascholastic extracurricular student activities regulation. On page 25, there would be an addition of language to the attendance guidelines section in order to comply with section 1003.21, clause 2B2, school attendance Florida statutes, and State Board of Education Rule 6A-1.09.515, excused absences for treatment of autism spectrum disorder, Florida Administrative Code, which requires school boards to adopt a policy authorizing a parent to request and be granted permission for absence of a student to receive therapy services for the treatment of autism spectrum disorder. On page 32, there would be an addition of the phrase or equivalent documents to curriculum guides paragraph, an addition of the phrase student performance standards in Florida to clarify references in state law to state standards, and it deletes obsolete language. Page 36 would add a section, elementary school recess, to codify the elementary recess plan into formal policy and address requirements in section 1003.455 Physical Education Assessment Florida Statutes. Page 41 adds a section titled to read differentiated student programs. On page 44, there would be a deletion of a duplicate section, home education. Pages 55 through 56 would add language to comply with requirements within section 1002.41 home education programs. Page 61 updates the cohort years in the section high school general requirements alternative education programs. Pages 62 through 64 clarifies language within the section regarding possible assessments. Pages 84 through 85 deletes obsolete language. Page 90 adds language to comply with requirements within section 1006.15 student standards for participation in interscholastic and intrascholastic extracurricular student activities regulation. And last change would be an addition on page 119 that adds the school district's non-discrimination notice as required by US 34 CFR 100 section 1000.05 discrimination against students and employees in Florida, K-20 public education system prohibited, equality of access required, Florida statutes, and State Board of Education rules, chapter 6A-19, educational equity. Those are the changes we're providing in this workshop. We'll gladly take questions now. We're not asking for any action till we bring these back to you in a public hearing on August 18th. And then we would ask for action on them at that time.
Well, thank you, Mr. Boyd. I will open up in this workshop, I will open up for public comments, questions or concerns. Anybody who wants to, you don't have to worry about the sheet. Just raise your hand. All right, so Mr. Boyd, it looks like there's no one who wants to speak up, so we'll conclude your workshop. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
And we will go ahead and convene a public hearing for our budget workshop, our tentative budget. Ms. Graver, good evening, ma'am.
Good evening. So tonight, this is the first public hearing on the proposed millage rates and the tentative budget for fiscal year 2020-21. Tonight's public hearing on the tentative budget will include the following: remarks regarding the proposed millage and budget. There will be an opportunity for public and board member comment. We'll request that you adopt a resolution setting the proposed total millage levy to support the 2020-21 tentative budget. We'll also request that you adopt resolutions approving the 2020-21 tentative budget as presented and approving the 2020-21 policy regarding the expenditure of lottery funds. We will request authorization for the superintendent and staff to perform all necessary actions to comply with truth and millage requirements. And lastly, we'll announce the date of the final public hearing to adopt the 2020-21 budget. So let me start by explaining what TRIM is. The Truth in Millage or TRIM legislation was enacted in 1980, and the requirements are detailed under section 200.065 Florida statutes. The statute dictates the form, size, and placement of budget advertisements, as well as the order of business during the budget hearings. TRIM requires 2 public hearings for open discussion of the millage rates and the proposed budgets of all taxing authorities. So what is a mill? A property tax levy of $1 per $1,000 of taxable property value. So 1 mil equals 0.001, and $100,000 times 0.001 would levy $100. The Florida Education Finance Program, or FEFP, is the mechanism by which state and local funds are allocated to Florida school districts. The Florida legislature sets the required local effort millage and the prior period funding adjustment millage rates that must be levied by the school board. The school board must levy the required local effort millage and prior period funding adjustment millage in order to receive any state funding under the Florida Education Finance Program. The total proposed millage rate related to school funding for the 2020-2021 school year is 6.026 mils. This millage will generate revenue for the general operating and capital outlay funds. As previously mentioned, the millage rates are determined by the Florida legislature, and this is the maximum millage that the school board is allowed to levy without a specific voter-approved referendum. The district must levy the required local effort and the prior period funding adjustment in order to receive approximately $310.1 million in state FEFP funding. In addition, we must levy the full basic discretionary millage to receive $17 million in compression funding from the state. The proposed total millage rate related to school funding is 6.026 mils, represents a decrease of 0.214 mils when compared to the 2019-20 rate. The reduction in the RLE from 3.984 to 3.761 mils equates to a reduced local tax levy of $6.8 million when applied to the current tax roll. So as required by TRIM, we must compare the proposed millage rate to the rollback rate. The rollback rate is the millage rate that would generate the same amount of revenue as last year if applied to the current year's adjusted taxable value. Under TRIM, the rollback rate is the basis for determining if tax rates have increased or decreased. So this next slide compares the proposed millage rates to the rollback rates. The current state law rollback rate is 3.8063 mils. The current proposed state law millage rate for 2020-21 is 3.778 mils. The proposed rate is 0.74% less than the rollback rate. The rollback rate for the total millage is 5.9497 mils. The proposed total millage rate is 6.026 mils. The proposed total rate is 1.28% greater than the rollback rate. So based on this information, we advertised a notice of tax increase on Sunday, July 26th. The Osceola County tax levy will increase by $11.6 million for school-related taxes in the 2020-21 year as compared to the prior year. While the millage rate decreased, the tax roll is up 9.8% over the prior year, thus generating the net increase. So how are property taxes calculated? The taxable value of a homeowner's property equals the assessed value as determined by the Osceola County Property Appraiser's Office less the $25,000 homestead exemption where applicable. The homestead exemption is an amount that is exempt from ad valorem taxes. The amount is established by law for properties used as the homeowner's primary residence and is normally $25,000. The portion of property tax related to school funding equals the taxable value divided by 1,000 times the school district millage rate. Therefore, in this example, a homeowner with an assessed value of $125,000 with the homestead exemption will pay $602.60 of school-related ad valorem property tax to Osceola County. So how will this impact our taxpayers in our county? This slide illustrates the changes in school-related property taxes for an Osceola County homeowner over the last several years. In this example, a home valued at $205,000 in 2016 would have generated roughly $1,242.90 in school-related property tax. If the owner qualified for Save Our Homes, by the 2019-20 school year, the assessed value of that same home would be $222,768. Based on that valuation, the school-related property tax would be $1,191.76. This is a decrease of $11.06 from the 2019 tax year and a 4-year cumulative decrease of $51.14. Now let's change focus from taxes to the budget you'll be adopting tonight. The key items in the budget have been shared with you in previous workshops and presentations. The budget that was presented to you on July 14th has been adjusted to incorporate the second FEFP calculation and the final certification of the tax roll. Other minor changes and adjustments were made to fund balances as we continue to close the 2019-20 fiscal year. Based on current FTE projections, FEFP and local tax revenues for the 2020-21 budget are $23.5 million greater than the 2019-20 year. Funding per student will increase by $135 or 1.84% over the prior year. This slide shows our long-range forecast. At the close of the 19-20 school year, we are showing a surplus in the general fund as we plan to increase fund balance going into the 2020-21 year, where we anticipate a mid-year revenue cut which is not yet reflected in the 2020-21 budget presented tonight. This multi-year forecast shows plans to then use the built-up reserves in the following year to preserve jobs when we expect a continued revenue impact due to the economic downturn. We would then strive to return to a balanced budget the following year. Careful monitoring of budgetary resources remains our top priority to ensure sustainability through any future funding shortfalls. So this is the district's total budget in summary form. General fund is the main fund from which most operating expenditures are paid. In addition, tonight you will approve budgets for the debt service fund, which is used to pay for the outstanding bonds of the district, the capital projects fund, which accounts for major construction and renovation projects, special revenue fund, which consists of food service and federal grants, and the internal service fund, which accounts for the district's health insurance, property casualty, and workers' compensation programs. The total tentative budget is $1,327,100,770. So I know this slide's a little hard to see, but it represents the annual budget at the level of detail that you'll be adopting tonight. And this is the same level of detail at which you'll approve budget amendments throughout the year. So Mr. Chairman, this is now the time for any public comment. After public comment, the floor will be open for board member discussion and other comments.
Thank you, Ms. Graver. If there's anyone that wants to make a public comment, again, it's not required to fill out a sheet, just need to raise your hand and I'll recognize you. I see none. I will open up for more discussion. I'll just start from my left, Mr. Thacker.
I've been through this about 4 times now with Ms. Graver, so I'm actually okay with where we're at. Nice job, Sarah, Jose, and your teams.
Thank you, Mr. Thacker. Ms. Castillo?
I have no comments, thank you.
I don't have any comments except well done. John, to you and your team, obviously. Mr. Whitesire, Mr. Booth.
You're good. I make this comment every year, Sarah, you know that, just so we're clear to the public that the state requires us to put a letter or a announcement in the paper saying we're raising your taxes when we're actually decreasing the millage rate and average homeowner will pay less, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I just wanna make that clear for the public so that everybody knows.
Mr. Booth,
I'm done.
Mr. Booth, you're very consistent.
I do that every year, just so everybody knows.
You certainly did.
That is the state law of tax increase means we're reducing your property tax millage and reducing the overall rate for the average homeowner. That's how crazy it is. Go ahead. I'm
On
done.
that, I'll move to approve the budget.
Second.
Alright, so
So-
I need to read it into the record.
So yes, start with 2.02.
Okay. Alright, so we recommend that the board adopt resolution 21-001, setting the required local effort, prior period funding adjustment, discretionary operating, and capital outlay millage rates for the 2020-21 year as follows. Required local effort, 3.761 mils. Prior period funding adjustment, 0.017 mils. Discretionary operating, 0.748 mils. Capital outlay, 1.5 mils for a total of 6.026 mils. And the total millage rate to be levied does exceed the rollback rate by 1.28%. So this resolution does require a roll call vote.
Very well, I will begin from left to right. District 4, Mr. Thacker, how votes he?
Aye.
District 1, Ms. Castillo.
Aye.
District 2, myself, I vote aye. District 3, Mr. Whiteside.
Aye.
District 5, Mr. Booth.
Aye.
The board voted, the vote passes 5-0. So we're on 2.03.
So now we recommend that the board adopt resolution 21-002, adopting the tentative budget in the amount of $1,327,100,770, and this also requires a roll call vote.
Mr. Thacker, what votes please?
Motion on this? First?
Roll call.
No, roll call. Aye.
Ms. Castillo.
Aye.
Myself, I vote aye. Mr. Whiteside.
Aye.
Mr. Booth.
Aye.
So we have 5 votes, the vote passes 5-0.
Thank you. Next, we have the lottery policy. While the school recognition and discretionary lottery funding were vetoed by the governor for this year, we're still recommending that the board go ahead and approve the policy for expenditure of lottery funds as listed on this slide. Just in case, you never know if something changes during the year, we'll go ahead, we'll already have our policy in place and board approved. So this just requires a regular vote.
Okay, so on item 2.04, do I have a motion?
Moved.
Second.
And there's a motion to approve by Mr. Thacker, second by Ms. Castillo. Any discussion before we take a vote?
When this was originally passed, the lottery, wasn't this money supposed to be spent on school?
There,
Tonight, we're approving $0. Just make
They're
that
not
clear.
selling any tickets, Mr. Booth.
there is other lottery money that goes to support K-12.
I understand, there's some scholarship funds.
This particular money
I
though is tied to
understand,
school
I understand.
recognition, and since schools were not graded last year, it
I
kind of made
understand.
sense to not
So
fund
thank
that.
you for clearing that up for the public as well,
Yeah.
but
Alright, so then we'll
it
take
is
a,
an interesting vote to take nonetheless.
so let's take the vote. All those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Against? Hearing none, vote passes 5-0.
And lastly, we recommend that the board authorize the superintendent and staff to perform all the necessary tasks to ensure compliance with the truth and millage requirements of chapter 200.065 Florida statutes. And this requires a regular vote.
We have a motion,
I'll make a motion to approve.
and there's a motion by Ms. Castillo, second by Mr. Whiteside to approve. More before we vote, any discussion? Alright, so then we'll vote. All those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, vote passes 5-0.
Okay, and then the final public hearing for the 2020-21 budget will be held on Tuesday, September 8th, 2020 at 5:30 p.m. here in the School District Administration Center at 817 Bellback Boulevard, Kissimmee, Florida. So this concludes the first public hearing to adopt the 2020-21 proposed millage rates and tentative budget. Thank you all.
Ms. Graber.
Thank you, Sarah.
We'll adjourn this public hearing and reconvene our regular public hearing and call for any modifications. I believe I do have one that's being requested by the superintendent.
That is correct, sir. I apologize, board members, but we will once again have to pull item 11.01, the Power School contract. We are still in negotiations to get this to a reasonable level.
Okay, so that's one. Any other modifications? Seeing that there isn't, do I have
I would like to make a modification, and I know we can't discuss it because it's confidential, but I'd actually like to pull item 10.08 and 10.09 and vote on them separate.
10.08.
Without discussion, obviously.
Alright, so we're pulling this and we're going to just put them for a future.
Just pulling it from consent.
Oh,
Yeah,
for
pull from
consent.
consent and we'll vote on them, but vote on them regularly.
That'd be part of the regular.
Alright, so where would they go?
I would suggest that you leave them as 10.08 and 10.09 since we don't have a regular agenda item under business and finance, and just do it before we do item 12.01, sir.
Very well,
Tanya, will that work for you?
Yes, ma'am.
got it. Alright, so I believe that's it. Alright, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda
moved.
as modified? By Mr. Booth and a second by
Second.
Ms. Castillo. All those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Consent agenda with its modification been approved 5-0. So that, having no information items, that does bring up item 10.08 and 0.09.
So, Mr. Booth, I'm assuming you pulled these because you're not in favor of them.
Correct. But they are confidential.
I understand.
Is your question that we didn't have an executive session to discuss the settlement?
Correct.
I was gonna bring that up at comments later in the meeting.
Board
that the
members,
issue
if it
for
is your
both?
pleasure, I can, I believe Mr. Kruppenbacher was planning to schedule an executive session following our next board meeting to discuss a couple of cases of litigation. We could also discuss these at that time, Frank, is that reasonable?
Yes.
I'm not even able to bring up those documents on my,
Well, I can deal with it.
Can you
Mr.
see 'em?
Chairman,
No, but
I would make a motion to postpone action on 10.08 and 10.09 until not our next school board meeting, but the meeting following our next school board meeting. I don't know the date of that,
I'll second that.
but that would be
August
on
18th.
August 18th. So my motion would be to postpone 10.08, 10.09 until our August 18th meeting.
I'll second that motion. Any discussion, board?
No, that's good. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Westshire. That was thank you for putting it together that way. That's exactly what I wanted to see done.
Alright, since the motion was made a second, we'll take a vote. All those in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
Motion to approve item 12.01.
Second.
12.01. Board, we have a motion to approve by Mr. Thacker and a second by Mr. Wildfire, item 12.01. Is there any discussion before we take a vote?
I got, Deborah, which one did you pull?
Only 11.01.
11:01, okay.
11:02 got.
But 11:02 is on the consent.
Yeah, it was part of consent.
Yeah, so it's, okay.
I know it got me.
Okay.
Moment too.
Oh, God, just.
Alright, so since I hear no
Skip.
calls for discussion on 12.01, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
I register 5 votes. Vote passes 5-0. Bring us to item number 13.01.
I'll make a motion to approve item 13.01.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve by Ms. Castillo, 13.01. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Booth. Board, any discussion on this item? Before we take a vote? Very well, we'll vote. All those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Passes 5-0. Brings us to 14.01.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, motion to approve 14.01 by Mr. Booth, second by Mr. Thacker. Any discussion of this item before we take a vote?
Yes, sir.
Oh,
I wanna say, I know we have Representative Supernal here, looking forward to your continued work in partnership with the school district. Obviously, you know, we have a robust capital improvement program happening within the district to keep up with all the growth that we've been dealing with in our community. Your organization has been a valued partner of our district in getting some of that capacity built. You know that this district is very focused on looking for opportunities to save money and honor the investment of our taxpayers as we're creating new student stations or modifying or dealing with maintenance issues. I would ask that you remain very mindful of that about the process, look for opportunities for continued efficiencies, recognize we have an important timeline to meet on what we're doing, and you've always done that. And I think I would conclude by saying, thank you for bringing your expertise to this district and working as a valued partner with us.
Well, I'm honored, sir.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you, Mr. Yes.
I'm not gonna add anything to that very eloquent speech. I appreciate that, Mr. Whitesire. I just wanna say Canoe Creek's right in my backyard, and you guys have done great work for us before, so I'm excited to have you on the project. And my wife will be going there, so I'll be intimate, and my son, so I'll be intimately involved. So thank you guys for all your great work in the past, and thank you for taking on this project for us as well.
You have my personal guarantee.
You'll be stopping in every day.
No, I won't stop in every day, but I will come check.
And
Thank you guys.
lock the gate, don't let it.
It's too close to the house.
Thank you, Mr. Weiser and Mr. Booth, for recognizing that that representatives from the construction company in this item were present. Really appreciate you and your comments. Board, is there anything further before we take a vote? Hearing nothing, we'll take a vote. All those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Vote passes 5-0. Brings us to item 15.01. And
I'm prepared to make a motion, Superintendent, any comment before a motion's made, or?
I just wanted to share with the board and the community, the board approved our Ready, Set, Start Smart Plan on June the 30th. Following that, we were required to submit a template to the state, which required the same basic information, but additional assurances for the fact that we will make sure that with our Ready, Set, Start Smart Plan, we will meet all of the needs of our ESE students, our ELL students, our migrant students, our free and reduced lunch students. So it just has additional detail required by the state, and it has since been approved by the state. But as out of formality, they've asked that we also get official approval from this board.
Motion to approve.
Second.
we have a motion to approve by Mr. Weiser, a second by Mr. Booth.
Discussion.
Good discussion.
Dr. Pace, I think it'd be important at this time if you would answer for the public. Is there an opening plan prescribed by the governor's office or by FDOE that allows a district to receive state funding that would not have a plan with a face-to-face option at this time?
Not at this time, sir, unless the local Department of Health issues an order indicating that the district should not open.
So if we do not open as prescribed by FDOE and by the governor, then our teachers will not get paid. Was that a fair assessment?
Unless the board were to
I mean, we won't get the funding to be able to pay the teachers.
we would not receive our per student funding through the survey 2 in October.
Which, Sarah, is approximately how much of our operational budget? The majority of our operational budget. Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my comments.
Very well.
Discussion.
I've got some discussion too.
So I wanna just go ahead and just take the order. So we'll have Mr. Weiser, Mr. Thacker, I believe Ms. Castillo will be afterwards, correct?
Sure.
Alright. I'm gonna wait till you're all done because you probably cover everything I wanna ask anyways. Mr. Weiser, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Booth, for your comments, and as I know you're pointing to, I mean, you're talking about 70 to 80% of our budget in salaries and benefits, and so you're right on point. Superintendent, thank you, as I've said at the last number of meetings, for your work in trying to balance all of the needs. I know you're looking at the learning losses and the academic slide that takes place with students not being in place, and the social emotional needs of our students, and force them to be engaged in quality learning environments. Of course, as our council would appreciate, the legal obligations that exist for us as a district to remain compliant, even as Mr. Booth pointed out. Obviously, the employment needs of nearly 8,000 people in our community that depend on us. The academic needs of 70,000 students in this community. The financial needs of our employees and their obligations to be able to take care of their families at home. The health concerns of all of our stakeholders in this community. The fiscal concerns of 350,000 people in this community that depend on this board to make decisions and how we balance what opening of schools will look like and deploying these various options. The technology needs and access needs that exist for our students, and trying to make sure that we have Wi-Fi and hotspots and mobile devices available for as many students as possible. The employment strains that are created for families by students not being in a physical school and having to deal with distance learning. Of of course, the legislative compliance that exists for us as well as the guidance that comes from the Department of Education. I think what I would say is, in thinking about, and that's just a quick summary of a lot of things, you know, Chairman, you said it very well earlier, and I appreciated your leadership in sharing that, and I would say back to you the same as you said to all the board members. I know that you care tremendously. You care for the work you do, you care for the role that we play, you care for the importance of the decisions we have to make, and I know that we're all trying to do the best we can to balance all of these concerns and needs. And I said it 2 meetings ago, I said it the last meeting, I'll say it again, and I suspect I'll say it at our next meeting. This board and the superintendent continues to evaluate and try to understand the best we can the changing landscape, try to mitigate as many concerns as we can, recognizing that we don't have perfection in our answers. Life isn't perfect, and we know that, and so having that is not a reality. I think you did a good job, Chairman, earlier in your comments of alluding to that. Our district has put together a very good plan, and there are continued opportunities to enhance it, to clarify it, to build on it, and that work never ends. And I've got to be honest with you, it's not going to end. Whether it's August 10th or August 24th or October 15th or November 20th, you can pick a date. What I know to be true is that this superintendent and staff and this board will continue to learn and understand and adapt and evolve along the way to try to do the best that we can to provide the best learning opportunities for our students, to serve our entire community at large and recognize the importance of the decisions we make, to care for our staff and their concerns for their financial well-being, for their physical well-being, for their families' well-being. This approval tonight is recognizing the fact that there's a formality we have to take in order to be in compliance with the Florida Department of Education. But what it really is affirmation of the work that was already done and presented almost a month ago, if my memory is correct, when we did our Ready, Set, Start plan. I know there's a lot of emotion, I know there's a lot of passion around this conversation with COVID-19, and I truly respect and I truly understand that, and I truly understand the concerns that people have. I understand the fears that some have. I understand the apathy that even some have, and so I'd say I agree with it, but I understand that it exists. What I want to say is anyone who chooses to take one statement or one part of what any board member or this board says is doing an injustice to themselves and a disservice to our community. There are times where Mr. Thacker will comment on academics. Mr. Booth might comment on employee concerns, and Mr. Soto may comment on the fiscal needs of our community. It doesn't mean that any one of those comments are in isolation. It's the unity of the body talking about all of the various needs that make up all the things that we're looking at. So as a community, let's be mindful of the fact that, as our chairman shared, we're all trying to do the best we can. We're all trying to understand the best we can. We're all trying to adapt the best that we can. And I promise you that these 5 board members, the superintendent, and the staff of this district cares tremendously for the well-being of our community, for the well-being of our students, for the well-being of our staff, and that we will continue to do the best that we can to learn, grow, and understand as we begin to prepare for what school opening will look like in the coming weeks, the coming months. And we will remain laser focused on ensuring that we always keep in mind the importance of education for the benefit of students and for their opportunity to continue to grow and to provide a pathway for success in their lives. That's incredibly important, while balancing the unique needs that we have to consider as a district, being the largest employer in our county. So I speak in favor of this item, but I think it's important to touch on some of that. We don't have the luxury board, as you know, to make decisions in isolation and to only consider one aspect of anything ever. So I felt like this would be important to say tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weissier. Mr. Thacker, I believe your light was next.
Question I've got is, I agree we have a well thought out plan. I'm basically in support of the plan, but a couple of weeks ago, a month ago, whenever it was, I am very concerned about testing and how we're gonna deal with it. I think that's a missing piece. I think it's a missing piece on how we're gonna deal with when something happens in a classroom, how are we gonna deal with that? I think I'll let you respond to that in just a second, but another thing that's extremely important about this plan is responsibility. And we have a responsibility to do certain things. Parents also have a responsibility to do certain things, and giving a child or themselves taking a medication so they don't have a fever when they go into school is totally irresponsible. We're all in this together. We all have to act like adults and do what's right, and realize when we don't do what's right and we don't keep people home that are visibly sick or physically sick with fevers and that sort of thing, it is a risk. There is risk associated. There's risk every day at school, whether there's a pandemic or not. So we've got to do things as a community to mitigate that risk. Things are going to be asked to do at school, wearing masks when they're in the classrooms, that sort of thing, are not because we think it's a joke. It's not because we're going to show how powerful we are. It's because the health professionals and the CDC say that's the right thing to do to keep everybody safe. So I have no doubt there will be bumps in the road. We've already made an adjustment to move it back to the 24th, which allows us to keep our pay intact and other things intact. I really appreciated Ms. Isaac's thing about being prudent. I think there's a lot of things we are being prudent on. There are probably a lot of things that we could have some very good discussions on whether, I wouldn't say we're not necessarily being prudent, but what the prudent answer is. So I'm basically in support of this. If we have a way or something that we're working on that gives some assurance that we can quickly test people, because I cannot understand how this plan works if it's a 2 to 3 week turnaround on a test result.
Ms. Castillo?
Dr. Pace, are you going to give us an update on some of what Dr.
Yes.
Sorry, Mr. Thacker is talking about?
No, you got to be a doctor too.
That goes a little later.
Yeah, I upgraded you.
I have an update
this is not
prepared
the chance
for item
us to-
18.01. If the board would feel more comfortable before taking a vote on this particular motion, I would be happy to give it now. It's the pleasure of the board and the chair.
I think that's a good,
I would
I think
like
that's
to
a
know
good
the-
idea.
I just didn't want to be superfluous and, just ask questions when I know that there's
Board, is that
another place for that.
a good idea?
Can I add one
Yeah,
question to that,
I
Mr.
wasn't
Chairman?
on though.
Let Ms. Castillo finish.
Yeah. I'm gonna go to you in a second.
Oh, yeah.
I know that we're all kind of stating our positions based on the comments that were done earlier, and I know that everybody wants to make sure that the community knows that we care. Obviously we care. I haven't slept in months, and Dr. Pace, I know you haven't either, because you're always on the phone with me when I'm asking the most random questions about the most random things. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not happening. The decisions that I'm making on this board are not just for other people. My daughter is also a student in Osceola County, and I don't sleep because I'm thinking of her and all the employees that we have in this county. So to say that we don't care, we don't take a lot of things personally. I try not to, but that I do, because we do care. Just because we don't show it in the way you want us to show it doesn't mean it's not happening. With that being said, there is nothing that none of the decisions that we're making are gonna be perfect, right? And I know that a lot of people aren't going to agree with them, and that's fine. I just need you to know that from my stance in this seat for District 1, I do care. I care more than you think. I didn't think that I had to state it publicly because I talk to people all the time, but if you have any doubt about whether or not I care about your job, your children, your family, here it is. I do care. I care deeply and emotionally about my community, and I am not here for politics. I'm here because I care about my community. So I would hope that when you're thinking about the job that we're doing, you also think about us. So there, I've spoken, apparently. Thank you so much for the work that you do. It is very hard, and I know that you take a lot of time to answer all of the questions that we have. The plan isn't perfect, we know that, but I think that we're doing the best we can with what we have been given. And I really appreciate you putting in the time and listening to all of our questions. At least I know you listened to mine, so thank you for that.
Thank you, Ms. Castillo. And Mr. Booper.
Listen, quick, I'm sorry to interrupt that and thank you for your response. I just wanted to add a question for when you do get started, you don't have to answer it immediately, is I think it was brought up earlier in public comment that there's some districts that have moved beyond August 24th for a face-to-face option, is that correct?
I believe the last date I've heard is August the 31st, because that
August
is
the
what the
31st.
executive order provides for.
Got you,
We'll
okay.
open
So,
for
that was
face-to-face
it.
instruction
Thank you,
in
Mr. Booth.
August.
Dr. Pace, before I hand over the floor to you, Board, would you allow me just to do a brief, I don't know, some kind of preamble to get this thing?
I don't know about this.
Listen, I just think it's gonna be helpful. So, just want to remind everyone, so, March, we had our spring break, and all of a sudden, our students haven't been back. They have not been back. It left the school district scrambling to put together some kind of functioning educational system at the last moment. And here's the thing I want to say, first of all, is that I commend the school district and my board members, because I believe you did an outstanding job. It was only possible because of the culture that we've already have established at this district. We've had to deal with hurricanes and growth. It's so many different things that are happening in absorbing so many different cultures, so many students, that our investment in digital infrastructure that we as a board we decided to do. I believe I was on that board with Mr. Weishauer, we're the original board members in that. And so we created an organization that was able to do quite well with the issue at hand, which was, by the way, we know it very well now, what we're dealing with. And so we got to that point, and immediately, one of the things that the school district and this board set about to do was, we know that the world has changed. Look, folks, we have a lot of professionals, and we know that we needed to go outside to get the expertise needed for what was coming next. And one of the things that this board did and the school district administration was to put together a task force that was gonna help us figure this thing out. We included into that task force every type of stakeholder that we could in order to listen to the different concerns, maybe get ideas or make sure that there were issues that we took into account in order that we could put this back to school plan. Honestly, I actually think that we could probably continue with that. I don't believe that work is done, but a little bit later, and we'll get into that when the superintendent presentation goes on. Which brings us here at this moment. All right, we have a little bit more knowledge of what's happening, what we're dealing with. But what makes this very unique, is that it's never happened before. And the other thing that I don't want lost, there's a lot of things, but these are the two things that I want to really highlight, is the fact that everybody knows what's going on. Right? The last epidemic that happened, we didn't have the sources of information and an educated populace the way that we do now. All right? We as a school district have professional employees, school teachers with degrees in physics, chemistry, math. They read the things that Dr. Pace reads, that I read. They understand. They know bunk and they know what's science. They know how to put these things together. And so they really want a voice and they really wanna be heard. And I get these emails and I'm beginning to understand that there's a lot that those questions are reasonable and legitimate, and we should work to try to resolve them. Because, Lord, our employees know, our parents know, our students know what we're dealing with. They have access to the same information that you do. And they could do the analysis. And so when they're scared, they have a reason to be. Our job, I guess, and I'll end it with this, we have a very difficult task, and that is what I like to say is a balance of harms. Because we understand that we have this system, this school district, the impact that it has in the local community, and then if we wanna go further on how it affects society at large. And all of the pieces that go into it that Mr. Weishauer mentioned, I don't wanna go through them all again because there's many. And then we have a virus that only behaves according to the laws of physics, chemistry, and biology, right? That doesn't really care about what decisions you're gonna make unless it affects it and it keeps it from propagating. And in between those two things and avoiding infections and avoiding people getting sick and dying, we also wanna avoid a catastrophe that can happen, not just because of the natural foreseen consequences of keeping a school district closed, but because of the other real consequences that, while not natural, will be imposed upon us. And that's where I will go and credit Mr. Booth for reminding us about those. That there are consequences which we do not agree with, we may not think they're fair or even logical, but are nevertheless real. We just cannot ignore them. We can't. We want our teachers paid. It's important. We want benefits to continue. So, before I hand it over, Dr. Pace, I think that what we really wanna do here, besides continuing with the input from our community, from our task force, from this board, from what you learn every day, is to present something, a plan that says, look, we have this risk. It is an acceptable risk that will avoid a much greater harm. Because I believe that no matter how good our plan is, if the risk is too high for employees, for students, I would not support opening schools. So that is a combination of our efforts and resources on our plan, which I believe is appropriate. And outside forces that I do not know just how much control we have. But if those outside forces are really what's hindering us, then you know what? Explain it. And let's make the decisions that are best for our community. With that, I yield. Madam Superintendent, you
May I
have the
approach the
floor.
podium, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So before I get started with my prepared update on our back to school plan, I do want to reiterate for our community that this board has consistently demonstrated a high level of care for both our students and our staff members. Since I became the superintendent in 2016, I believe we've had a hurricane or school closures related to weather all 4 years, but I know 3 out of the 4 years. One of the times we were out for, I believe, 6 instructional days. At every single incident, you all gave me the authority and the power to make sure that we did whatever we needed to do to provide instructional time for our students as required, but to make sure that no employee was harmed in terms of salary or benefits during those difficult times. We were able to allow our employees to stay home, take care of their families, take care of their homes, take care of the things that they needed to do without worrying about losing a paycheck. Last spring in March, as you said, Mr. Chairman Soto, we had to turn on a dime. We're middle of spring break and we get orders saying we're gonna extend spring break by a week and then start digitally on March the 30th. The district team worked collaboratively with teachers, with staff members to put together the resources that we needed to do to issue over 18,000 laptops and 4,000 hotspots to our students, to continually adapt and support instruction during that time period. At the same time, the state was giving us some leeway with instructional minutes, as long as we were providing school on a daily basis. And so we recognized the stress that digital learning was causing for our families and for our staff members who are all dealing with the same concerns and worries about how do we manage our time in this new world from home and keep learning going on. 94% of our kids engaged. The expectation, however, was only 2.5 to 3 hours a day, recognizing that both parents and staff members, many of whom are also parents, had lives to balance. We did the best that we could to close the school year. And again, no employee was harmed. No one lost an ounce of their salary or any of their benefits. That has always been a priority of this board, and this situation is no different. You approved our Ready, Set, Start, Smart plan on June the 30th. We said at that time that the situation was evolving, it was complex, and that we would adapt based on the data, the concerns that we had from our community, from our stakeholders, from our experts in the field. On July the 14th, I brought forward as a blue sheeted item an opportunity to push the school start date for students back to August the 24th, and you had faith in me and the team that we had put together to approve it, giving us 2 additional weeks for data to improve before we asked students to come back to school face to face. We pushed pre-planning back by a week so that teachers weren't reporting until August the 10th instead of August the 3rd. Building in time during that 2-week period so that we had ample time to provide training on safety protocols, on digital tools in case we have to go digital full-time again, on new curriculum unit plans and our instructional continuity plan, which has been adapted so that it can make an easy switch from digital to face or back and forth as needed, making sure that we're still following state standards and curriculum timelines consistently across the district, regardless of which modality teachers are providing instruction in or students and families have chosen is best for their child to start the school year. And at the same time, we did all of that with the assurances that employees would receive that critical first paycheck in August. We recognize how important that is to the 6,000 9 and 10-month employees who have spent the summer taking care of their family responsibilities, but many of them balancing a spouse, a partner who's lost employment during this crisis. And this is the paycheck that they're counting on to stay ahead of their rent, their mortgage payment, their car payment, the grocery bill. So I just want to say again, I appreciate the demonstration that this board has always said to make sure that we are taking care of our employees, but at the same time, balancing the risk, balancing the harm with our professional responsibility to educate kids, all of them, to the best of their potential. So, I'm pleased to report that now we have 41,189 responses from families linked to current enrolled students in the district. Because we serve about 70,000 students, but about 20,000 of those are in charter schools, we are now missing only about 10,000 students that we've not been able to track down. That is still an ongoing process. As of this week, we've transitioned from about 47% face-to-face and 46% digital to vice versa. So that about 47% of our families are indicating a desire to start the school year with digital instruction, and 46% of our families are indicating a readiness to return to school for face-to-face instruction. That is different district by district. District 1 data is different from District 5 data. In Mr. Booth's District 5, it's well over 50% of families who want face-to-face instruction. But we are able to provide a choice, which is also providing some flexibility for our teachers, where we will take steps to mitigate the risk of exposure if they are coming to work full-time in their classrooms without kids on a face-to-face basis. We still continue to see strong interest in Osceola Virtual School. And we actually have sent additional support staff this week from some of our other departments to support that team in processing enrollments because it's come fast and furious. We are reaching a point of maximum capacity for the 7001 site. That's our K-12 curriculum site, because there is a process of registration, and that's a different curriculum. Materials have to be sent to the home that can't be provided on the local level. We've currently processed registrations for 645 students in 7701, and then 269 students in 7704, which is our Florida Virtual School franchise, using the Florida Virtual School curriculum, but our district teachers, for a total of 914 students. Keep in mind, because there's still a lot of confusion out there, that Osceola Virtual School offers parents and students more independent study. They can do it on their own time, work more at their own pace, but the curriculum is heavily text dependent. Students need strong skills and literacy to be successful in that program. And it requires a lot of motivation, a lot of self-discipline, and it requires grit, the willingness to stick to it. Keep in mind too that with Osceola Virtual School, there's not that flexibility of going from Osceola Virtual School to face-to-face instruction at the district after a period of about 3 to 4 weeks where they're heavily enrolled into the curriculum. Then they can only change at a semester break. Schools are continuing to follow up with individuals who've indicated a desire to enroll in OVS but haven't yet completed the registration process. And as we make those calls, we're learning that a lot of parents really thought they were choosing digital learning. So we're helping them select their choice and get the school set up to make those scheduling decisions. Want to remind everybody though that the digital learning expectation for the new school year is very different than what we did in the spring, where the state did give us flexibility on instructional minutes. We are still expected to perform and provide instruction for the required instructional day, for the full 900 hours of instruction, for students to be able to earn credit or advance in their efforts for promotion. So our teachers doing the digital work will be prepared to actively engage with digital learning during that instructional day. They'll encourage students to take physical activity breaks between transitions, for example, a class change at a middle or high school, or we're moving from the reading block to the math block in an elementary school. We know that kids need to get up, they need to move around a little bit, they need to stretch. All of our students during that digital instruction will have a 30-minute time that's set aside for their lunch break. Our elementary school students will still have a designated time for recess daily. We encourage parents to make that an active time, not a time to transition to PlayStation, but instead to go outside, get up, exercise, do some yoga, something to get their brains and bodies moving. And elementary schools will also have a dedicated special area class every day that our resource teachers are providing instruction for, so that our elementary special teachers don't have to provide both face-to-face and digital learning at the same time. So we know that's gonna be a very different experience, and I wanna make sure everybody understands what that level of expectation is. I also wanna make sure, because these are constant questions that are coming up from parents in our community, all of the students in Osceola Virtual School doing digital learning and face-to-face instruction are still required to complete district assessments and state required assessments. We will make opportunity available for our district baseline assessments to be done digitally for our digital learning kiddos. But right now, there have been no provisions outlined by the state to provide a virtual option for those state required assessments. And even in the spring, when we're doing our state required assessments, Osceola Virtual School makes arrangements for those students to come in for face-to-face administration of those tests. I do want to tonight recommend another adaptation to our Ready, Set, Start SMART plan. As we've said, we're gonna continue to evolve as the situation continues to change. In our back to school task force meetings and at our meeting on June the 30th, you heard from Dr. Alexander and Dr. Cadilia, our infectious disease specialists from our Nemours Children's Hospital partners, who indicated that they felt comfortable with that 4-foot distancing, particularly with our younger learners, and that they felt comfortable with students removing their masks during class time for that period of time. As the data has continued to change, as the experts have learned more about child-to-child transmission, even asymptomatic children transmitting the COVID virus, on Friday the CDC issued new guidelines indicating that any time that they cannot be 6 feet apart, which we know our classroom seating will not allow, 4 feet works, 6 feet does not, that they need to keep their facial coverings on. That will not be popular for some folks who don't think we should wear masks at all. The research, however, outweighs those particular fears and guidelines, and I remind the board that our Ready, Set, Start SMART plan provides options to parents. If we have parents who were prepared to send their kids face-to-face to school but don't think they should wear a mask in their classrooms, they have the option of transitioning to digital. All they have to do is call their school. If we have students and parents who were going digital because they were concerned about being without a mask at any time in the classroom, and they decide, hearing this change that I hope the board will reach consensus on tonight, that they wanna come back to face, I encourage them to call that school. Now is the time that we're gathering the data to make final decisions about classroom assignments, master schedules, and we wanna get that information out to teachers by the middle of next week. So I would just encourage the board to have some discussion about that and consider it. I called Bianca McCluskey today again. We speak on a real regular basis. She is our local administrator at the Department of Health. She agreed that based on the CDC guidelines and the information that she's been given from her state and national leaders, this possible transmission of COVID from children who are asymptomatic, who are not wearing facial coverings, really makes that facial covering an absolutely essential part of the work. It's really kind of taken over, particularly for younger children, the thermometer taking every day, although we're still going to take students' temperatures. But I think as Mr. Thacker pointed out earlier today, the most important thing that we can continue to do is to emphasize our collective responsibility as adults, as parents, as children, as teachers, as staff members. If you're not feeling well, do not come to work or to school. We will make arrangements for students to transition to digital learning if we need to. We'll work with teachers to provide substitutes. We had over 300 of our substitutes last week commit, saying that they wanna come back to provide face-to-face instruction. We're taking steps now to make sure that they're provided the same training that our instructional staff will receive during pre-planning, both for safety procedures as well as our digital tools, so that they'll be prepared to support instruction in that modality if they have to. But it's super, super important that as we're making these decisions, we all understand we have that collective responsibility. So before I go on, I'll let the board have any discussion you'd like to take. I don't believe I need formal action. This would be an adaptation to our plan, but I do want to make sure that I have consensus for the board with the understanding that the expectation would be that students would wear masks in the classroom all the time. Certainly break could be provided if they went to the restroom by themselves or something like that. The only time really that masks would be taken off would be at recess when they're on active play, remembering to stay 6 feet apart. We're gonna practice that during that first week of school, and also then when they're actively engaged at PE and physical activity, and again, staying spaced apart, or athletic activities, conditioning, those types of things where we've already saw. And of course, then in the cafeteria when they're seated at their tables, eating their lunch or their snack.
Dr. Pace, I wanna go into an item that Mr. Thacker brought up and that we touched upon a little bit. You know, one of the most important components of our plan to lower the risk and increase the safety of our students and staff is to have a very active response to any kind of positive testing and contact tracing. Can you give us an update?
Certainly. Certainly, I have two other things that I wanted to provide an update on. One is a testing protocol, and then the other is where we are in terms of providing materials and supplies for parents. Because those are the two things that I know the board has been very interested in and that we're also getting from teachers in the community. So first, as in regards to your answer with questions, Sarah Graber, our Chief Finance Officer, and Lauren, our Director of Benefits, had a very productive call this afternoon with Kenneth from the Rosen Care Group, who manages our healthcare center, and Dr. Shaw, who has a testing facility, infectious disease specialist, who's working out of the Lake Nona area. We've already done some preliminary work in a small scale with rapid testing for people who've been exposed possibly to COVID in the district. He has a commitment to turn testing around between 24 and 36 hours. But he is also ramping up in his work with a lab in the Lake Nona area to be able to potentially contract with us for pool testing, which has just recently been approved by the CDC for large group settings, where you wouldn't necessarily test everybody in the school, but you would have a risk assessment with the expertise of Dr. Shaw helping us to create that. We would develop a standard testing protocol where you would test a certain percentage of your employees every week on a rotating random basis. You take 100 swabs, you test 5 of those. If none of them come back positive, you can go on to the next 5 and go on to the next 5. So you're basically paying, instead of 100 tests, you're paying for 20, and you have assurances that basically out of that pool, you would have no spread. He highly recommends that we consider doing that both for employees and students. Now, of course, we would have to have parent permission for students, but he's very excited about the fact that it could also potentially add to the research about spread among children of the COVID virus. He's working with Johns Hopkins University. There would be a cost involved to the board. Lauren and the team are going to be following up with him. We believe that we have the expertise in our staff between our district RNs under the leadership of Mandy Kraft and also the LPNs at each school to be able to, with the supplies that we need to take the swabs. The pool testing is a throat swab procedure. The symptomatic testing is the nose swab procedure. that we would be able to take those tests, get them to the lab and get results back in a 24 to 36 hour process. So I was very encouraged by that call today because I think there's true potential there to answer some of the concerns of the board and also to reassure our staff members and our students that we are seriously looking at this and doing everything that we can to try to reduce spread both at our schools, at our departments, and also in our community.
More than any on that. Mr. Thacker, do you have any final?
No, I think that's what we've gotta have for preventative and for reaction to a positive case on how we're gonna deal with it. And I think a lot of the stuff I've read, and I've read a bunch of different things, a lot of the treatments and the reduction of the severity is getting an early jump on dealing with it. So instead of waiting somebody wait 2 weeks to find out, this makes me feel much better. That we can discover it quickly and treat it quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Thacker. On this side?
I'm good on both, Superintendent.
The only other thing I would add, I would just, continue to remind you that Rosen Medical Group has just become a true partner for us in so many different ways, beyond just the work that we're doing with them in the health clinic. So we wanna thank Mr. Rosen, thank Kenneth Aldridge and the whole team for that partnership because it's really proving invaluable in situations like this that we didn't necessarily even anticipate. And then finally, we've had a lot of discussion about supplies and equipment and cleaning materials and those types of things. I know there's a lot of concern among our teachers and staff members, among our families about where we are with our equipment. This board has already demonstrated commitment to provide those things, both through some of the Title I roll forward dollars that we use for digital devices and hotspots in March, to some of the CARES Act dollars that we're using to provide facial coverings for every employee, 5 cloth washable facial coverings for every student, every staff member. We also have additional facial coverings that were provided to us from the governor's office and the local Department of Health that we have available, 15 for people who are in a frontline position with children. We have over $500,000 from the GEARS Act dollars to serve our student and staff needs with things like hand sanitizer, cleaning supplies, PPE for our LPNs in the clinics because we know they will be frontline in the event that we have somebody come to work or come to school who's symptomatic until we can get those children or those adults home. We've recently committed with some of our CARES Act dollars to buy iPads for all of our kindergarten students, laptops for our third grade students to kind of extend the work that this board has gradually tried to do, not to get to a full one-to-one, but to get that way by growing it slowly in a manner that we will still be able to have consistent refresh cycles. So there's absolutely no expectation that our teachers or students need to provide their own face coverings or their own hand sanitizer. Hand sanitizer remains on our wish list for school supplies, but as you know, this board directed us a couple of years ago to really look at reducing our school supply lists and having some consistency across the district so that we didn't have some school supply lists that cost people $250 and others that cost people, $20 to $25 per child. And I think that's more important than ever with the economic hit that's happened as a result of the pandemic. So teachers and students are welcome to buy or bring original masks. If somebody wants a Batman mask or a Wonder Woman mask, I think that's all the better. See if you like them in bright colors, that's great. The ones that we are providing are safe but simple. The most important thing is that everybody has them and wears them, and that is something that I think again is gonna have to be a consistent expectation. So that's really all that I had. But I hope that was valuable information to answer some of your questions and also some of the questions that we continue to get from the community.
Before you leave Dr. Pace, I just stopped. Mr. Thacker, is there?
No, I have no comment. Yes, thank you, Deb.
I do have questions as usual, but I wanna yield the floor to others because I know I typically have
It's your
a long
turn.
list. Okay, great. So, my first question is with regards to the data for each district. You mentioned that there was different data for each district. If you don't mind, would you mind sharing the data for just District 1? You don't have to give it to me now. Okay, I just want that for myself.
If you have a chance to look through your
Is it
emails, I sent that to you
an
earlier.
attachment? Okay,
Yes.
I saw the one for just
That's all
the
the schools, I
district.
believe?
Got
It
it.
has, there are several different documents. If you look at each file, there's one that's by school and there's
Okay.
one that's by district.
Okay, I
Got
saw the
it.
one by
Okay,
school.
so I'll go ahead and take a look at that myself. Thank you so much. And my other question is with regards to the 6 feet apart, and I'm asking this mostly because I've had teachers say, I'm nervous about going back to school. I'm going to do it, but I'm really nervous about the 6 feet apart, right? So we have data saying that only about 46% of our students are returning back to school, right? Does that help with possibly adding more space? Help me understand, is the issue a capacity issue? Is it a space issue? Why can't we do 6 feet versus 4?
It's going to help considerably in our cafeterias and buses and in our hallways and those mass areas where we expect larger children. It will help on the playground with things like recess. It will help us in the locker rooms and PE. So I do believe that starting the school year with about half of our students choosing digital instruction will help to alleviate some of those concerns. In the classroom, remember that regardless of whether or not we're doing face-to-face instruction or digital instruction, class size requirements remain the same. So
I understand. Okay.
So if I have a teacher who's teaching 25 students digitally this period, I still need a teacher teaching teaching 25 students face-to-face this period. Unless that teacher has agreed to do a blend and have, say, 10 digital and 15 face-to-face. If you remember, we have offered to compensate teachers who are doing that simultaneous blend. So that's not applicable if I'm teaching 3 sections of English 1 digitally and 3 sections of English 1 face-to-face. Those are just 6 different periods. I already teach 6 out of 7. But if I agree to teach a couple of periods where half of my students are in front of me, half of my students are at home, I know that there's gonna be additional time at the end of the day beyond just the normal grading of papers and answering emails to respond to the digital parents and students, particularly because we know that there's gonna be some extra work potentially to make sure that they're staying fully engaged in that work when they're not right here in front of us. So the classroom, the 4 feet we think is good, but now that you're adding in that additional layer of, we're gonna keep those facial coverings on, you get that specific protection.
Okay, I understand. Thank you for helping me.
I believe if you also, I know you guys are very, very busy during the day. I sent you the link to the CDC guidelines that were issued specifically on Friday regarding facial coverings in schools. There's an excellent chart that we're using.
I've also had questions about assessments from our parents. So just to reiterate, so I can help answer these questions. We are definitely having assessments, yes.
We are.
We know that district assessments can be done digitally, but we do not have any kind of direction for state assessments yet.
Correct, not yet.
Understood. Okay, and then my last question is with regards to, it's not really a question, it's just kind of an idea from corporate. I love to bring my corporate ideas. When I go to work, I have to do a little survey stating my temperature, whether or not I've been exposed and whatnot before I'm even allowed, quote unquote, to go into my office. Do we think that that might be something that we can implement? Because I know that, it sounds, we're dealing with kids, but, just kind of to add that actually layer of reminder for parents, you wanna make sure you check that temperature before you allow your kids to go to school.
We have that signage available that we're putting in prominent places. There are apps that are out there at a cost.
Oh, okay.
For us to be able to gather that data individually. And then there's also the cost of staff time to identify who's done it and who doesn't do it. So that's a time when I instead have recommended that we rely on the communication, the collective responsibility that we all have in our community to take those questions seriously. And we will have they're on the doors before you enter the front offices of our schools. We're getting them for the front offices here. They're currently in production, but we'll have them before students return on August the 24th. It's on all of our Ready, Set, Start Smart materials, our website. We're gonna continue to push that from a communication standpoint. And certainly if it's something that the board wants me to investigate further, I will. But when we looked at it, the gains versus the losses,
Sure. Yeah.
I wasn't sure that it was that meaningful because the person who isn't taking it seriously isn't gonna take that survey seriously.
Okay.
That's fascinating. I actually think that I think that maybe if the board will allow, I'd like that to be explored.
Like the
Seem to
app
me-
version?
the app.
Okay.
There's just,
Have you done that anywhere at the courthouse, Reese?
No, actually, no.
I've done it much.
Yeah, I
But it
can't
ta-
go to work unless I
It
put that
ta-
information in.
it's not long,
Yeah, it's like
but if you think about getting 3,000 kids into a school,
That's true.
it's a minute or two.
No, but the app idea that
It'd be
I don't
done
know, I just
in the
think- I
classroom,
just-
not in the car ride.
no, it would not happen, it would happen at home, see?
Oh, at home.
And
Yeah.
so,
But see, the follow-up is the important thing, Chairman Soto, to also remember.
but we're getting data that we could act upon, that we could analyze, we could see a lot of things. And then if we're doing that random sampling scheme that you just mentioned with the John Hopkins study, this thing ties right into it.
I'll be happy to bring back some
Would you
information for the board to
Just a
consider.
little bit of exploration on that?
Yeah, my opinion on this is explore it, understand where the opportunities are, where the costs are, where the benefits are, and then
Right.
we can report back and figure out what that may or may not look like and what the mechanics of implementation are and how that works.
And also confer with Rosen Group and our infectious disease researcher, see how that fits into it. And I think that there's also, by the way, I also think that it just keeps it in the fore, in the mind of parents, because there is a level of responsibility that community has in order for this to work. And that keeps being, I don't say lost, but I wanna emphasize that I think the board here is very concerned that a lot of folks, and I think it was Ms. Castillo that really, touched on this directly, that this is a collaboration, and I think that these kind of apps kind of keep it alive in people's mind in terms of being mindful. And so I don't know, I just think that I
I'll be
don't want
happy to bring back
dispense-
some information, sir.
Yeah, I would do that. I do have something, but it's kind of short and it'll probably finish it. Let me just continue with Mr. Weissier.
Thank you, Superintendent. I think I'll speak directly to you and then to the public. What you just did is look, we know you do this all the time. We all talk with you all the time, and we understand that there's a ton of research and analysis taking place, not even daily, like by the minute, by the hour. And so what you just modeled is exactly what this board said a month ago, which is we have the best plan possible at the moment. We're gonna continue to review, analyze, and adapt, and we will continue to evolve this as we move forward, and you just played that out. Let me just shift for a moment. There are teachers and family members, parents in the community that are truly concerned. What I wanna say to the community is, if maybe people are tuned in and watching this meeting now, listen to what's being discussed and listen to the information that's being put out by the district. And don't allow your thoughts and your fears to be hijacked by social media and the fear mongering and the name calling and all these other things that are happening out there. There are parents and staff that are just truly concerned, and their hearts and their desires are in the right place, and they're trying to figure out how to access information and make the best decision for their families and, in our case, for the community. What you just saw modeled by the superintendent is exactly what's happening as a district all the time. And I promise you, to the community, the way to advance your cause or your call or your issue or your concern or your desire is not grandstanding and not slandering and not name calling and not, saying that people don't care and all this, childish stuff and approach. It's by being engaged, being insightful and being respectful and understanding that this process will continue to move forward. Superintendent, I want to encourage you. I know you'll do it whether I say it or not because it's just innate in who you are. Don't allow all the negativity that swirls around to get to you. Stay laser focused on your cause and on your mission. I know you will. I've said 1,000 times, as has the rest of the board, you have my support, you have our support. When all of the little comments and negative things are coming, they don't bother me. I mean, I just choose to focus on the positive and results and not dwell on the negative. I know you're the same, so keep doing what you're doing. Don't ever feel like you have to yo-yo on your positions because somebody's unhappy about this or somebody's unhappy about this. Always be true to who you are and stay focused on the information, the data, and the resources, and deploy the skills that you have as a leader to continue to lead this district the way you are. You're doing the right things, you're making the right calls, you're doing the best you can. Good job.
Thank you, Mr. Weissier. Mr. Booth.
Thank you, Mr. Weishauer. I appreciate that, and thank you, Dr. Pace. Again, we know this is a living, breathing document, and we are, even if it has a mask on, it's still living and breathing, and we know we're gonna adapt on the fly, but that's the beauty of the leadership team that we have now, is that we have the ability to do that. And certainly, board, I've heard people come to this podium before, and Terry said, for you, lots of times, and tell us how much we didn't care. I mean, heck, I've been told I don't care about teachers, and I go to home with one every night. And I was raised by two, so don't let that affect you. Keep your head down, do what's right for your community, do what you feel is right. You were elected to do a job for the community. Hold Dr. Pace accountable, which is what we do, and let me tell you, she's doing a fantastic job. And I certainly hope the community knows that. And look, for all the stuff we hear, if you come to my side of town, 54% of the people are sending their children back to school. That's a majority of the people. And so they're ready. Again, my wife is certainly apprehensive. She's a teacher, but she's going back to work. And we're gonna make it work. And she trusts that we're doing a good job and that Dr. Pace is doing a good job. I'd like to say this, one thing that we haven't touched on, and maybe you can help me moving forward with this. We've talked about parental involvement, we've talked about, students understanding what's going on, we talked about teachers being involved in the health, and we've talked about parents. I think we need to reach out as a district to our business community to let them understand and work with their employees. Somebody may work at Publix, and they may be on the way to take their child to school. They show up and they get the temperature check and it's 100 or 101 or whatever the limit is. And they can't go, now they've got to take this child home. This child's not allowed to enter the school. They've got to take this child home. So I think hopefully we need to, maybe it just could be just a press release to say, hey, businesses, please understand the dynamics of what's happening. And I think everybody will be on board. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make one more comment. I was gonna hold off to the end, but I think it's actually a good place to say this. And I wanna make this, my position very clear. I've heard a lot of rhetoric this week about, and I know it's politically charged because some of the things the national unions are saying and whatnot and all that jazz. But to say that teachers didn't do anything last spring, teachers didn't work hard, that they were just wanting to get that check and that's it, and they didn't, stay home. I can tell you, I live with a lady that busted her tail to service over 100 ESE sixth graders. I watched my third grader who has a team teaching situation. Those ladies had, two sets of third graders. I watched those two ladies bust their tails. And even the art teacher at Harmony Community School to make sure that there was an art assignment for those students. They worked very, very hard. So I want folks to know that, again, as Mr. Weishauer said, don't listen to the junk, the political junk you hear either from the national unions or from folks arguing against them. Understand that we all know, school board members know, the community knows how hard the teachers really worked. And again, just as you said, put all that out, stop and taking all that in. But I think it's important, with that said, to make sure we all know, and I know I speak for you guys as well, you know how hard our teachers work. So thank you, and I'm done, Mr. Chairman.
So Mr. Booth, I too have personally witnessed a few teachers that throughout that time, I was just in awe. And so I totally, right now, and of course I recognize Erica. And and the other teachers that I know, that really, it was harder than being, it was a lot harder. As a matter of fact, it was like the whole day, like from the morning to nighttime when you go to bed. It's remarkable. But I wanna go ahead and close this up. We talked about a lot of things, we touched upon a lot of things. And here is something that has been floating in my brain, but I don't know when it's important enough when we're facing so many other things. We're gonna have assessments. There's one thing, and Mr. Booth, you touched upon it. There's one thing that I understand is that effective classroom management, effective teaching, it's like synchronized swimming, let's say. There's so many pieces that go in to effectively teach a human being, a young human being. So many things that come into play. Of course, you have all the research that says, oh, this is how the curriculum works. And then you have all the pedagogy, right, and how do you deliver it. You have the technology pieces. Then you have the schools, the school boards say, hey, we want to spend this much money because we want it to look this way. And we want our classrooms to be able to set up like this. We want our desks to move. We want our smartboards to brighten up and open up a window to the world to these students. There's just so many things. It's like a complicated clockwork. And I'm gonna be very curious, and I really do want to pay attention to all the metrics, because I really would like to know whether the answer could be whether we could find the answer as to whether or not effective teaching could even happen. And I know that's something that probably worries all of us. We're gonna do our best. I understand that. We're developing techniques and training. But when you think about everything that goes in to effectively teach a human being, and now COVID and everything that we have to do in order to prevent people from getting sick while still coming into these schools and doing all of this work, I wonder what's gonna happen.
What I can tell you, Chairman Soto and members of the board and certainly members of the community, is that I have no doubt that every educator in this district is committed to doing their very best work to serve our students. Through their fears, through their anxiety, through the pressures and the stress that they feel, that our parents feel, that our children feel. Because don't think for a minute that our children aren't experiencing a significant level of stress.
Absolutely.
From our littlest learners to our largest learners about this situation. And so we're gonna do everything that we can in our best to make sure that learning does happen. Because when I think about the long-term impact of an even more significant loss of learning, you're talking about an entire generation of children and young people whose futures could be forever changed. And it's our job to give them our very best.
And that will
I know I'm committed, you're committed, I know our educators are committed.
Thank you. And we'll go to the contract phase. Thank you very much. Board, anything further on
We
this?
need to vote on
No,
Yes,
there's no board.
15.01.
Yes,
Okay.
We've never voted on
If
that.
there is,
Motion and a second.
I think we did 18 though,
yes, we did.
but we've got to
so we'll
vote
go
on
back to
15.
1501.
Tanya's gonna hate
I'll
me
let-
tomorrow.
I'll figure it out.
Motion.
It's a motion and a second already.
Can you remind me?
Mr. Weishauer made the motion, Mr. Booth seconded.
Very well, okay, so without any further discussion, we'll take a vote. All those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the vote passes 5-0. And so that takes us really to business, I guess?
Attorney comments, please.
Where? Oh, yes. Frank.
Yes. Members of the board, next Tuesday, following the August 4th board meeting, I would ask that you hold a closed executive session on the following 4 pending legal suits. I'm required by law to read the following. Sticks LLC, the Teal versus the School Board, Circuit Court, Osceola County, case number 220 CA 1410OC. The next case is Signer Health and Life Insurance Company versus School Board, State of Florida Division of Administrative Hearings, case number 20-2788. Next case is Richmond versus the School Board of Osceola County Circuit Court, case number 69CV1024-ORL 37LRH. Next case is Alicia versus the School Board 2018-CA-27160N. Requesting, I believe we'll spend about 30 minutes on each case. Estimated in attendance will be the members of the school board, the superintendent, myself. In the Sticks matter, Tom Callan, partner of mine, will also be present. There will be a court reporter for the benefit of the public. We will only be discussing litigation strategy and or settlement. And upon conclusion of each case, there would be a transcript available for the public to read as to what went on in that meeting. So with that, we'll notify a court reporter to be ready to go. Additionally, one other item, I was gonna ask Tanya. Tanya, the gentleman who came tonight and made comments on the air conditioning issue.
Yes, sir.
Could you expedite typing them verbatim what he said? Or getting it to me?
What he said during his public comment?
Yes.
Get Ruben to send him the video.
Okay, and get me his name and number so I have it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
Thanks, Peter.
Okay, would that be it?
Yes, sir.
Very well.
One last thing I'll opine on. Members of the board, the public, if they saw every day, I'm inundated with emails among all the Florida school board attorneys. We're on an email thing. Every time you resolve an issue created by this pandemic, it is opening the door to 10 more issues. There was a lawsuit filed in Palm Beach County regarding an ordinance mandating masks. The judge ruled, I sent it to Dr. Pace. The judge ruled in that case that denying the emergency injunction, saying that the county basically had the right to do what it was doing. We're seeing these issues all over the place. So if you hear of an issue, if you'd let Dr. Pace know, we can hopefully head it off being a bigger issue. I'm saying, so just if somebody complains to you, please pass it on to Dr. Pace, because every day we're vetting issues back and forth that are coming up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kuchar. And so we need 1701 in, so now 18 unfinished business, I think we've done that.
Yep.
19 new business, if we have any. Do we? New business. Very well. Takes us to number 20, board member comments. Mr. Thacker, Ms. Castillo. No, Mr. Westside.
Brings us to number 21.
Oh, number 21, adjourn.
Second that emotion.
Zachary, thank you for doing that.